I'm filing for divorce. Christian placed the neatly stacked papers on the marble kitchen counter. His voice was calm, so calm it could have been mistaken for a dinner invitation. Carol didn't even look up. Her fingers continued tapping away on her phone screen, glossy nails clicking against the tempered glass. She was watching her company's IPO announcement stream. Why? She asked absently, still focused on the figures rising on the stock chart. He didn't sigh. He didn't raise his voice. He just stared at the food that had gone untouched in front of her. Because the food I cooked got cold. The words hung there, strange and stupid and full of meaning. Carol finally looked up. What? She blinked as if his answer had been in a language she no longer spoke. Christian didn't repeat himself. He didn't need to. On the table sat a full meal, grilled sea bass in ginger soy, jasmine rice, and a miso broth with soft tofu. He had made it from scratch like he always did. Like he used to when they had nothing but each other. Back then, when the orphanage kitchen was too crowded, he'd steal moments with a second-hand rice cooker just to make something that would warm her up during exams. She used to say no one cooked like he did. That even the cheap food he made tasted like love. Now, she didn't even glance at the plates. She slid her phone aside and folded her arms. If this is about last night, I told you, Lawrence was just a business partner. He brought me home because I drank too much. Christian didn't answer. He only observed her. Her rose gold earrings glinted in the light, each studded with a single pink diamond. One of those earrings alone cost more than what he earned in a year writing serialized fiction online. She noticed his silence and narrowed her eyes. So, this is your way of punishing me? Walking away? He let out the faintest laugh. It wasn't bitter. It was hollow. I'm not punishing you. I'm letting you go. Letting me go? She echoed. Christian stepped back, brushing his palms on his apron like he always did after cooking, but this time, there was no second round, no plating, no hopeful glance. You're the heiress now, Carol, of the Linwood Group. Your boardroom needs you more than our dinner table ever did. You're being dramatic, she scoffed. You think this will hurt me? He didn't answer. She stood, arms crossed. What about Ethan? You can keep custody. He already changed his surname to Linwood. You're really doing this over food? No, he said softly. I'm doing this because we no longer live in the same warmth. The silence returned, except now it felt colder. For a moment, a flicker of something crossed Carol's face. Maybe it was memory, maybe it was hunger. She glanced at the food again. You could have just reheated it, she said, too quietly. Christian's gaze was steady. Some things don't taste the same once they've gone cold. She didn't stop him as he left, she didn't say his name, and he didn't look back. Christian never knew his parents. The earliest memories he had were of cold winters at St. Margaret's orphanage, blankets too thin, meals too bland, the silence at night broken only by children crying in their sleep. But he never cried. He would sneak into the kitchen and watch the cook, a grumpy man who softened when talking about spices. That's where it began. His obsession with warmth. By age 9, Christian was chopping vegetables. By 12, he could mimic the recipes. While other kids played, he'd sit cross-legged with a notebook, scribbling stories, fantasies about families that didn't forget birthdays, homes that smelled like soup, and love that never needed to be begged for. Stories and soup, that's how he survived. That's also how he met Carol. She arrived at the orphanage 2 years after him, small, guarded, silent. The adults called her difficult, but Christian noticed how she flinched at the scent of garlic and how she always gave away her carrots. He'd sneak her plain rice on hard days and burnt toffee on good ones. Slowly, she opened up. The first time she laughed, it was over a half-burnt pancake he'd shaped into a heart. Years passed, they clung to each other like orphans often do, trying to build a future out of thin air. When they aged out of the orphanage, they rented a cramped studio with broken plumbing and a crooked stove. Christian worked odd jobs while writing short stories on the side. Carol enrolled in a local finance program. It was hard, bills piled up. Sometimes, they shared one bowl of noodles. But every night, Christian cooked for her. He treated dinner like a ritual, carefully folded dumplings, rice porridge laced with ginger, handmade bento boxes when she had back-to-back lectures. You make me feel like I matter, Carol said one night, curled against him in their small bed. Don't ever stop cooking for me. I won't, he promised. Then, came the rupture. Carol's biological family found her. She was 23 when the Linwood family arrived in black cars and tailored suits. Her birth parents had spent decades searching. The Linwoods were magnates of real estate and hospitality, an empire that spanned continents. They cried when they met her, handed her documents, gifts, a bloodline, a legacy. Christian stood quietly during that reunion, feeling like an unwanted shadow. Still, Carol didn't leave him. She insisted on staying married, even when her parents frowned. "This man gave me a life when no one else did," she said, arms looped around Christian's waist. "I'm not letting him go." For a while, it seemed possible, love and legacy, both. They moved into a Linwood-owned penthouse. Christian tried to adjust. He kept writing. He cooked in the industrial kitchen, trying to find familiarity among stainless steel and timers. But it changed Carol. The board meetings, the social galas, the corporate grooming, it all started pulling her away. Then came Ethan. Their son, born with Carol's sharp eyes and Christian's quiet mouth. Christian cooked even more after Ethan was born, pureed vegetables, soft rice porridge, bone broth for Carol's recovery. He gave up his part-time job to care for them full-time. "I want to eat your food forever," Carol whispered once, rocking their newborn in her arms. "Even when I'm rich and successful." She was both sooner than expected. The Linwoods fast-tracked her into the company. Articles called her the Golden Heiress. Photos of her at charity galas circulated. Christian often wasn't invited. Ethan began school early, an elite international program that focused on global leadership. At age 4, he had a calendar busier than Christian's. Tutors, etiquette lessons, piano. The Linwood elders ensured their grandson was raised with dignity. Christian's meals started returning untouched. "Dad," Ethan said one evening, "Ms. Chen says dumplings are peasant food." Christian blinked. "Do you think that?" Ethan shrugged. "Chef Lang says I should eat more foie gras." Christian tried not to take it personally. Children reflect the world around them, but the distance grew. Ethan no longer called him dad in front of others. At events, he stayed close to his maternal grandfather. Carol rarely corrected him. Then came Lawrence, a family friend, polished, fluent in Mandarin and mergers. Christian would find him seated too close to Carol during dinners, whispering jokes. He always laughed too loudly. "You're imagining things," Carol said once. "Do you like him?" "I like the way he respects me." Christian said nothing. Respect wasn't loud, it was silent and repetitive, like making someone soup at midnight because you knew their throat was sore. Frances remained the only constant in Christian's life. She had grown up with them in the orphanage, a shy girl who loved sketching. Now a teacher at a nearby school, she still called once a week. "Are you okay?" she asked gently. Christian always said yes. Once, she brought over a thermos of soup when she heard he had a fever. "Who takes care of the caretaker?" she whispered. He didn't answer. Meanwhile, Carol thrived. She swapped her jasmine perfume for Ylang 49, swapped noodle bowls for wine pairings, swapped whispered dreams for boardroom conquests. At a family dinner, Christian offered to make Ethan's favorite fried rice. Carol stopped him. "The staff will handle it. Let's keep it presentable." He nodded, quietly, took off his apron. That night, as he cleaned up the dishes no one touched, he remembered the girl who once whispered, "Don't ever stop cooking for me." He remembered, and let it go. Christian first noticed the change when Lawrence started showing up unannounced. It began with business dinners, then came late meetings, then the casual drop-ins, always dressed to impress, holding bottles of wine too expensive to open on weekdays. He'd greet Christian with a smile too smooth to be sincere, then brush past him into the living room, where Carol would already have her laptop open, 2 glasses ready. "He's just a colleague," she told Christian one night, waving off the tension in his eyes. "We have projects overlapping. Don't be insecure." Insecure? Christian had stood beside her when all she had were student loans and second-hand heels. He had written entire novellas under flickering lights just to pay the rent for the tiny apartment they once called home. And now he was insecure? The final straw came on a Friday evening. Carol wasn't home yet, and Ethan was cranky from school. Christian had made his favorite, steamed dumplings and stir-fried beef with scallions. The boy sat at the table, scrolling on his tablet with headphones in. Christian placed the food in front of him and said gently, "Eat while it's hot." Ethan glanced up, wrinkled his nose, and pushed the plate aside with the back of his hand. The bowl tilted, piping hot soup spilled over the edge and splashed onto Christian's wrist. He flinched, but didn't cry out. "What's wrong with you?" Christian asked, more stunned than angry. I told you I don't want this, Ethan said, glaring. Why can't we eat like normal people? I want Chef Lang's pasta. Chef Lang isn't your father, Christian muttered under his breath. I wish he was. The silence afterward was heavy and final. Christian turned to the sink without another word. Carol walked in 15 minutes later, heels clicking across the floor. Lawrence was behind her, carrying her coat like a valet. She saw the mess, the shards of porcelain on the floor, the red burn on Christian's arm. What happened? She asked. He didn't want to eat what I made, Christian said flatly. Ethan ran to her side. It was an accident, he whined. The food was gross. Carol didn't look at Christian. She bent down and stroked Ethan's hair. It's okay, Mommy's here. Lawrence cleared his throat. Perhaps we should have a trained chef supervise meals going forward. These things happen. Christian's jaw tightened. The comment wasn't even directed at him. He wasn't part of the room anymore, just background noise. That night, as he sat alone at the kitchen counter nursing his burn, Carol walked in with a glass of wine and said, You know you don't need to cook anymore. We have chefs now. He nodded slowly, setting down the ointment tube. I know. It should have been just another dismissal, but it felt like a final verdict. She wasn't asking him to stop cooking, she was asking him to stop being who he was. The next morning, the house was quiet. Ethan was at school. Carol had an investor call. Christian took his time preparing breakfast for himself, nothing fancy, just rice porridge and soft-boiled eggs, the way he used to make in the orphanage. He sat down and ate slowly, thinking about how long he had clung to rituals no one else remembered. When Carol walked in, she looked exhausted. Her makeup wasn't finished, her voice hoarse from meetings. He slid an envelope toward her. She looked at it, then at him. What is this? Divorce papers. She blinked. Again? Christian didn't flinch. I already signed. I'm leaving everything. The house, the money, custody, all of it. Why now? She whispered. He looked at the empty seat where Ethan usually sat. Because even my son thinks I'm disposable. Because food, my love language, has become an inconvenience in this house. Carol sat down slowly, like her knees gave out beneath her. I gave up my career for this family, for you, for Ethan, and now I'm the stranger in my own kitchen. You're being dramatic, she said again, but even she didn't sound convinced. Christian leaned forward. I am not taking a cent. I don't want the Linwood name. I'm going back to where someone will eat what I cook and say thank you. You'll regret this, she whispered. I already regret staying this long. He stood and walked toward the door. Carol didn't follow. The gates of St. Margaret's creaked open just like they used to. Christian stepped through with a single suitcase in hand and the scent of burnt firewood in the air. The orphanage hadn't changed much, peeling paint, crooked stair rails, children's laughter echoing down the hallways, but something had shifted inside him. For the first time in years, he felt like he wasn't intruding. Brother Christian, a small voice yelled from the end of the corridor. A blur of little feet ran toward him. 4 children tackled him at once, hugging his waist, pulling at his coat, eyes wide with glee. You came back! You promised you'd make those crispy rice cakes again. I told them you were real. Sister Elaine emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. You're thinner than I remember, she said, squinting, and quieter. I didn't know I was loud, he smiled. You were, she chuckled, especially when Carol got sick and you argued with the nurse because she wouldn't let you stay overnight. His smile faltered a little. That night, he cooked for everyone, 20 bowls of steaming noodle soup, all from scratch. The smell filled every room. Children hovered at the door, sneaking bites when they thought no one was looking. After dinner, the kids sat on the floor around him. One little girl with pigtails whispered, Brother Christian, can I marry you when I grow up? The laughter was pure, unfiltered, innocent, and for the first time in a long while, he laughed too. Later, while cleaning up, he caught sight of his reflection in the kitchen window. The apron looked better here, not a uniform of shame, but a badge of purpose. He thought back to the first time Carol had taken him to meet her biological parents. She had held his hand so tightly, her palm was damp with sweat. They're going to hate me, Christian had whispered. I don't care, Carol said. I love you. That's enough. It wasn't. He remembered shielding her in the orphanage when older kids mocked her for stuttering. He'd stood between her and the insults, fists clenched, teeth gritted, That night, she brought him a roasted sweet potato she'd hidden in her coat and told him he was her favorite person in the whole world. Years later, on a snowy evening, he bit into another sweet potato she handed him and pulled out a tiny silver ring. "It's all I could afford," she'd said, cheeks red. "Let's give each other a home." He had cried, she had laughed, they both had believed it would last forever, but fairy tales don't survive in boardrooms. The next day, Christian taught the kids how to knead dough and slice scallions. They watched him with awe. "Brother Christian, you're so cool," one said. That night, while the children were brushing their teeth, his phone buzzed, a number he hadn't saved, but he knew it by heart. He picked up. "Christian," Carol's voice wavered on the line. "Can you send the recipe for the chicken congee you used to make for my grandfather? He's asking for it, he refuses to eat anything else." Christian said nothing. "Please, he's lost so much weight, I don't think he has much time." He still said nothing. "You don't have to come home, just the recipe. I'll give it to the chef." Christian ended the call. He stared at the phone in silence, then turned it off. Food was how he said, "I love you." Recipes were his poetry, his memory, his devotion. She wanted to outsource it now, to delegate it like a transaction, and he wouldn't let her, because some things, once cold, cannot be reheated. He tucked the phone into a drawer and went to tuck in the children, each one already dreaming. Christian never expected the livestream to go viral. He started it quietly, with a borrowed tripod and an old smartphone taped to a box of flour. The kitchen in the orphanage wasn't glamorous, chipped counters, uneven flames, but when he began to cook, something happened. His voice, steady and warm, guided viewers through the smell of garlic sizzling in oil, the soft folding of dumpling skins, the patient art of balancing spices. His handle was simple. @Brother Christian Cooks. At first, it was just a handful of viewers, a few comments. Then someone stitched a clip of him telling a child to taste the soup and trust your heart, not just the spoon. By morning, it had 800,000 views. He leaned into it. He traveled across towns, Jiangxi, Suzhou, Chengdu. Wherever he went, he cooked with locals, tasted street food, learned secrets from grandmothers who hadn't written down a single recipe in their lives. He slept in shared rooms, edited videos himself, and smiled when strangers handed him bowls of food, calling him Chef Dad or Brother C. He wasn't rich, but he wasn't invisible anymore. One of his videos reached the producers of King of Chefs, the nation's most watched culinary competition. They called him and asked if he'd like to join. He hesitated, then remembered the kids watching him from the orphanage, cheering during every live stream. He said yes. The show was intense, 30 chefs, each with formal training and Michelin dreams. Christian was different. He brought his worn knife, a wooden chopping board, and zero ego. In every round, his dishes were simple, but unforgettable. He made braised pork with persimmon glaze. A grandmother in the judging panel cried. He made congee with scallion oil that reminded one of the judges of his late mother. By the finals, Christian had become a fan favorite, not just for his cooking, but for how he spoke to the ingredients like they were old friends. The final challenge, memory on a plate. He made fried rice. Not just any kind, the first dish he ever cooked for Carol. Steamed rice from leftover grains, scrambled egg folded gently, a drizzle of soy sauce, finely chopped scallions, and love stirred in, quietly, sincerely. As he plated it, his hands didn't shake. He looked into the camera and said, "The first time someone cooked for you, do you still remember them?" The auditorium went silent. Among the crowd sat Carol. She was paler now, thinner, her lipstick was smudged, and she wore sunglasses indoors. Beside her sat Ethan, clutching a bouquet. A tiny badge on his chest read, "Support Team, Chef Christian." When the judges crowned Christian King of Chefs, the crowd erupted. He smiled and held the medal in his hand, but his eyes didn't search for anyone. Ethan broke from his seat. He ran down the steps, shouting, "Dad, Dad, we made you these." He held out the flowers with shaking hands. Christian looked at the boy he once carried on his shoulders to the night market. The boy who used to tug his apron asking, "Is it ready yet?" The boy who had once said he wasn't worthy to be his father. Now that same child looked at him with eyes that begged for a second chance. Christian took a step back. "The food I made for you," he said quietly, "is already cold." Ethan froze, his small hands dropped to his sides, the bouquet slipped to the ground. Carol stood slowly, her eyes glistening. "Christian, please." He didn't look at her. He simply bowed to the audience and walked off stage. Backstage, Frances waited. She hadn't said much all evening, she never did, but she held out a towel for him and smiled. "You did it," she said softly. "Did I? You fed hearts. That's what matters." Christian smiled faintly. She didn't demand anything from him. She never had. She only ever showed up, with a thermos, a call, or a smile when he most needed one. Meanwhile, in the crowd, Carol sat back down, as if her legs had lost strength. She stared at the bouquet on the floor. Someone nearby whispered, "Wasn't that her ex-husband? I heard they split years ago. I thought he was just a cook." Carol didn't move. Ethan leaned into her shoulder. "Mom, he hates us now." She didn't answer. Her company had recently taken a hit. 2 board members had left. Investors were uneasy. Lawrence had flown to Singapore for business and hadn't replied to her calls in days. She looked down at her hands. For the first time in years, they were shaking. Later that night, she tried to leave a comment under Christian's latest live stream. It was an emoji, a bowl of steaming rice. The system flagged her account, blocked from commenting. Carol stared at the screen. Slowly, her thumb hovered above the icon, but she never pressed send. The ancestral Linwood estate was quiet, eerily so. The usual echo of staff footsteps had dimmed, the hedges outside were overgrown, and only 2 cars sat in the expansive driveway. Christian hadn't stepped foot here in years. When the call came from the housekeeper, he almost didn't answer. But when she mentioned the name of Carol's grandfather, Elias Linwood, the only elder who had ever defended him, he set down his ladle midstream and listened. "He's asking for your soup," she said simply. "He won't eat anything else." Now, standing in the kitchen once again, Christian stared at the marble countertops he once avoided touching. Everything gleamed, polished to corporate perfection. But Elias's voice had been weak on the phone, and in the end, this wasn't about reconciling with a family, this was about honoring the one man who had seen him, not as just a cook, but as a human being worthy of respect. He prepared everything by hand, no pre-cut vegetables, no help from the staff. He boiled the broth with ginger, ginseng, and aged chicken. He simmered it slow, just the way Elias liked, no shortcuts. When he stepped into the old man's bedroom with the tray, he found Elias sunken into the pillows, his skin almost translucent, but his eyes sparked at the sight of him. "You made it," he whispered, voice rough but sincere. "I keep my promises," Christian said, settling the tray gently on the side table. Elias coughed, then chuckled. "Still stubborn?" "Still silent," Christian answered. He helped the old man sit up, fed him carefully, spoon by spoon. Elias chewed slowly, and his eyes began to well with tears. "No one cooks like you," he rasped. "Not even the Song family chefs?" Christian teased softly. Elias waved a hand weakly. "Overrated." A pause. Then Elias looked at him closely. "Is there no chance left? With you and Carol?" Christian took a breath, then he set the bowl dough. "One." He didn't need to lie. "I once loved her more than I loved myself," he said quietly. "I would have given her everything, and I did, but that time has passed." Unbeknownst to him, Carol stood just beyond the doorway, fingers gripping the wooden frame. Her eyes widened, as if hearing his voice for the first time in years. She stepped away before he could see her. Outside, Christian stepped into the courtyard to clear his head. The wind had shifted, autumn was creeping in. He didn't expect to see Lawrence standing by the koi pond, lighting a cigarette. "Well, if it isn't the apron boy," Lawrence said coolly, exhaling smoke. "Back to playing house nurse?" Christian didn't answer. Lawrence took a step forward, eyes scanning him. "You walked away from her. Now you think one soup and a halo makes you relevant again?" Christian looked past him. "You've always been obsessed with being the loudest in the room." "Maybe, but I'm still here, and she still answers when I call. She always did like broken things." The cigarette fell from Lawrence's fingers. "You son of a—" "That's enough." Carol's voice cut through the silence. Both men turned. She stood between them, no makeup, hair barely combed, a coat thrown over her shoulders like armor. For once, she didn't look polished. She looked raw. "Don't talk to him like that," she said to Lawrence, eyes sharp. Lawrence scoffed. "Defending him now, after all this time?" Carol didn't respond. She simply turned to Christian. "You were right," she said. "I didn't see what mattered, and by the time I did, it was gone." He stared at her. The girl from the orphanage who once held his hand so tightly before facing a crowd. The woman who now stood with her pride cracked open. "Christian, please, can't we try again?" He shook his head slowly. "Why should I prove love to someone who won't be in my future?" Carol's lips parted, but no words came. Footsteps echoed behind them. Ethan, still in school uniform, approached them with trembling hands. He walked right up to Christian, eyes glossy. "Dad," he whispered. "I was wrong." Christian didn't say anything. "I told people you weren't my real dad. I said you were just some cook, but I was stupid. I was trying to be like them, fit into the family. And now, I don't even know who I am." Christian knelt down to his level, meeting the boy's watery gaze. "Do you know the difference between being wrong and being right?" he asked gently. Ethan shook his head. "Being wrong doesn't mean you're unlovable, but refusing to make it right, that's where people lose each other." "I want to make it right," Ethan cried. "I do. Just give me another chance." Christian's voice stayed calm. "You broke the bowl. You can't unbreak it. You can only choose not to drop it again." Ethan threw his arms around him. "Please, don't go." Christian gently peeled the boy's arms away. "I never really belonged in the world you live in now. I gave you my warmth, my food, my stories, but they weren't enough for you then. I didn't understand." "I know." He stood, brushing the dust from his pants. He looked at Carol. "You taught him to reach for more. I taught him how to taste love. Let's hope he remembers both." Carol stepped forward, eyes red. "If I could go back." "You can't," Christian said simply. "None of us can." "Then what can I do?" she asked, voice barely audible. He looked toward the kitchen window, the scent of Elias's finished soup still lingering in the air. "Don't reheat what you let go cold," he said. "It won't taste the same." With that, he walked away, leaving behind the marble halls, the pond, the name Linwood, and every version of the past they had buried together. The orphanage had only one working air conditioner, and it buzzed like a tired bee. In the summer, the children all crammed into the hallway with popsicles melting down their arms. They fanned themselves with school books. When the heat got unbearable, they begged Christian to tell them a story. So he did. He knelt on the worn rug, surrounded by 20 children who sat like listeners around a fire, eyes wide, hair damp with sweat, hearts open. "Once upon a time," he began, "there was a boy who cooked because he didn't know how to speak love any other way. He had no parents, but he had hands. And with those hands, he built homes, out of rice, soup, stories." When the story ended, one of the kids whispered, "I think that boy is you." Christian smiled and tousled the child's hair. Maybe. He had become dad to all of them now. No ceremony declared it, no forms, no surnames, but when scraped knees needed tending or someone had a fever at midnight, it was Christian they called. When a child woke from a nightmare, he'd hum a tune while stirring a late-night bowl of sweet congee. When they celebrated birthdays, it was his handmade noodles and sponge cake that brought the most joy. The love here was unpolished, sometimes messy, but real. He never once asked for anything in return. He resumed live streaming, but this time, not for fame. He filmed his days to teach the world what love looked like through food. Videos of him cooking orphanage potato cakes and 2-spoon noodle soup went viral again, not because they were trendy, but because they tasted like home. Occasionally, old fans would send him letters, gifts, even donations. A retired chef from Spain sent him his mother's handwritten recipe book. A child from Tokyo sent him a hand-drawn thank you card. The name @Brother Christian Cooks trended on food forums around the world. He was offered book deals, brand sponsorships. He declined all of them. He stayed at the orphanage. One New Year's Eve, he made 108 dumplings. The children helped him fold them, some messier than others. They laughed when flour stuck to their cheeks. The fireworks began just as they boiled the first batch. He carried the biggest pot to the common room where everyone was gathered in their pajamas, faces lit by sparkler light from the window. "This is Dad's home," he said, his voice quiet but clear, "and I'll always stay with you." They cheered like he'd won a trophy. Outside the orphanage, time moved on. Carol's company stumbled, 2 back-to-back lawsuits, a miscalculated merger. Then came the scandal. An internal leak revealed manipulated earnings. The board turned on her, investors vanished. She stepped down. Her health declined soon after. Stress, doctors said, exhaustion, years of overwork and unspoken grief. The last time Francis saw her, she barely recognized her. "You should go see him," Francis offered gently. Carol only shook her head, a frail smile on her lips. "He already closed the door. I don't want to knock again." She died quietly 2 years later, at 45. No press release, just a private cremation, funded by her own dwindling estate. At the funeral, Ethan stood alone. He had just turned 17. His eyes no longer burned with teenage defiance, they held something heavier, recognition. After the guests left, he remained, clutching a sealed envelope. Inside was a note his mother had kept for years. Christian's first story draft. A fictional tale of 2 orphans who built a house out of dumplings and lived happily ever after. It was signed, "For Carol, if no one else ever loves us, we will." Ethan folded it carefully and put it in his coat. He didn't cry, not yet. He waited 2 weeks before going to the orphanage. Christian was in the garden, teaching the kids how to plant tomatoes. Ethan stood at the gate, unsummoned swords, able to enter. One of the children noticed. "Brother Chris, there's a guy at the door." Christian looked up, he saw him. Their eyes locked. Ethan opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He wanted to say so many things. "I was wrong. I miss your cooking. I miss your stories. I miss you," but none of it seemed enough. So he stayed quiet. Christian wiped his hands on his apron, then nodded, once. It wasn't forgiveness, it wasn't a reunion. But it was a beginning. Ethan walked away, this time, slowly. Back in the orphanage, one of the little girls tugged Christian's sleeve. "Was that your real son?" Christian looked down at her, then at the kids gathered around, waiting for him to finish the planting lesson. "I've got a lot of real kids," he said, ruffling her hair. "Now come on, or the tomatoes will never grow." That night, he made stew. They sat on the floor to eat, the lights flickering above, laughter echoing through the halls. Outside, fireworks bloomed again. Another child's birthday, another reason to celebrate something small. He looked at the scene before him, bowls clinking, noodles slurped, flour smudged on noses, giggles between bites. This wasn't revenge, this was peace, and peace, he realized, was the loudest silence of all. He didn't need them to regret losing him. He only needed to never regret walking away.